This is a training video done by LCE Graphics, and this is setting up dual stitch head operation with 4 stitch heads. If you have the 4 stitch head option on your Duplo 4000 booklet maker, this is how you set the stitch heads up. Now, if you'll see right in the center of your screen, you see the eject roller. When we were running, if you're running a job and you're using the 2 stitch heads, you have to unlatch one of the eject rollers from the operator side stitch head right there and slide it over so that when your booklets eject, they eject straight. Now when we're ready to set that system back up, that eject roller has to be left on the outside. So right there is where it has to be when you're setting up for 2-up CD booklets. So we're going to put the roller right there where you see it on that segment. Move it over to that segment. Move it over to the segment to the left. Okay, this is where it would be normally when you're running a normal job. Now, when you're going to set up for 2-up CD, you have to move it over and put it right there on that segment of the roller right there. That's where you leave it set up. Okay, now we're ready to move our stitch heads into position for 4 stitch head operation. Now, if you marked the position where your stitch heads go like we did, you can see right there, we marked it with a Sharpie. We can move our stitch heads back to the same position again by simply sliding them over and moving it using the pointer back to that same position and tightening the retaining screw. Now you move the 2nd stitch head over. Okay, now we're going to loosen the thumb screws underneath where the clinchers are and move them over. Now the clincher, the center of the clincher is the driver bar. The clincher has a driver bar right in the center, and you simply close one eye and you line up, you center the driver bar in the opening for the stitch former. You can see it right there. Would you point to it? That's it right there. And you can see that's the opening for the stitch former. And then right below you'll see the driver bar for the clincher. It's a steel bar about a 1/2 inch wide, and that's the one you line it up with. The stitch driver bar is always in the center of your clincher. Okay, now you do the same thing with the 2nd stitch head. There's the clincher now. On the outside it's going to be moved over. And lined up again with the driver bar. It looks like it. Would you shine the light? I wanted to indicate right here, right in this area where you see me pointing to right here, this is the groove for the stitch former. Right below it, you'll see right there that I'm pointing to, that is the driver bar for the clincher. You see how they're centered on each other. And that aligns the clincher with the stitch head. And now both are set up, and now we can install the stitch former. Let me show you what the stitch former looks like so you can see what that's the stitch forming part of the hone or stitch head. Okay, let's go ahead and put it in. It's also very important, of course, your safety door on this booklet maker prevents it from running, but you should have the power turned off when you're performing this maneuver, either moving them to position or moving them out of position. So now your stitch heads are aligned, your clinchers are aligned in position, you're ready to staple 2-up CD booklets. Now we can lock the stitch wire back in. Now by turning on the clutches for the drive gear, now we're able to start feeding. Now the first staple or two may not be exactly right, because when you remove the stitch former, you lose the staple that's being held by it. So your first stitch will be blank with no stitch, and then the second, probably by the third stitch, you should have a good stitch. This completes our video on changeover of the 4-stitch head operation. Should you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call. And also keep in mind that it's important to keep your shafts clean and lubricated. You don't have to use an excessive amount of oil, but 3-in-1 oil, a small amount, on your shafts, as you can see there, on both the stitch heads and the clinchers, will help a great deal when having to move these into position. And when you go to move them into position, if you can take just a few seconds and wipe the dust that's accumulated on the shafts when they're not in use, will help reduce problems, because then when you slide the heads over, it prevents that dust from getting inside of the bushing and creating stress and not allowing you to move your stitch heads back and forth freely. Should you have any questions, you can always contact us. Thank you very much. Bye.